The words weekend warrior mean different things to different people. For me these days, it means suffering through strength and ultra endurance training, whereas 5 years ago, it meant suffering through rather drastic 3-day hangovers. And that's right, folks. Today we are talking about our infamous friend, alcohol. And somewhat ironically, that's gone horribly. What I was going to say is that we're going to open a cold can of non-alcoholic beer, which was ironic, but what is most ironic is the mess I've made on the floor. I'll be right back. So let's kick off with my historic relationship with alcohol. As with most Scottish teenagers, it began at the age of 14 years old on a park bench. And if you're sitting there cringing at that as a statement, I agree. Moving into university, did what most university students in the UK do, drank, and actually then entered the working world with Heineken UK's graduate scheme, working in sales in London. So that was intense. Lots of pints were consumed, and even more so considering that working for a major brewer meant that you didn't need to pay for those pints. So plenty of them were consumed, and I actually ended up training as a powerlifter on 2 pints quite frequently. Not something I recommend, but we'll touch on that. From there, I moved back up to Scotland, and since moving into a different industry and ultimately building the businesses that I now run, I have refined my approach and relationship with alcohol over the years to the point that I am now, which is quite balanced and deliberated and considered, and we're going to break that down from my perspective today. Before we dive into some of the science behind why I approach alcohol in the way that I do these days, let's actually explore how I approach alcohol these days. So ultimately, I will get it wrong on a quarterly basis. And by that I mean I will set time aside around big events where I will build in downtime to have more than 1 or 2 beers. But what's important is that I acknowledge that I'm going to be wrecked and feel terrible off the back of that. So I build in time around it where I've either front-loaded work or back-loaded work so that I am not trying to fight through a hangover, because it's not good for me cognitively, it's not good for my mental health, but it means I can enjoy social events with alcohol and not need to be hard on myself. Secondly, I have replaced midweek beers with non-alcoholic ones, hence the mess I made earlier. But I'm in no way demonizing alcohol, and I will have a beer or a glass of whiskey on Saturdays or Sundays depending on how I'm feeling. So I'm not in any way pushing you away from alcohol. I am just encouraging you to be very moderate and mediated with it, and to understand that you need to be selective with when you send it. So with that in mind, let's break down 5 key things to consider if you are wanting to train like an athlete as well as consume some alcohol. So let's start with the obvious point, one that we're probably all aware of, which is after you tip the balance from a beer or 2, a glass of wine, spirit in a mixer, there's a sharp decline in performance. And that is because our reaction is impaired, our judgment is impaired, our coordination is compromised, as is our motor patterns. And those are all things that I deem, and you probably should deem as well, quite essential to performance. So with that in mind, one of the key things I need to consider as an athlete, and you should too, is how alcohol fits into the realm of nutrition. Alcohol can dramatically impact the quality and quantity of nutrition that we take on before, during, and after alcohol consumption because, as I've already mentioned, our judgment is somewhat impaired. There is a study available on PubMed that is on the screen for you just here and available in the description down below that reinforces this very point as it breaks down the relationship between alcohol and nutrition. The next point to consider along the same lines is how it affects our hydration levels. As many of you will be aware, alcohol can increase the frequency of our bathroom visits, and that is in part due to the fact that the hormone that helps us retain water as human beings is compromised with alcohol consumption. Along with the water that is exiting our body comes also the electrolyte balance that we retain, and as you'll know as an athlete, or I hope you do, electrolytes are essential in terms of cellular hydration for us to be able to perform at a high level. It's why you see triathletes consuming electrolytes as they're on the bike, runners as they run, etc., etc. I can't imagine there's many fully fledged professional athletes watching this, which means that you are considering yourself an athlete within probably a working lifestyle, which means that you need to be aware of your cognitive function as well. And that is a huge part and parcel of why I approach alcohol the way I do these days. And there is a study just here, linked in the description down below, also available on PubMed, that makes the link between dehydration and cognitive function. And you'll know, if you're dehydrated, if you're hungover, you're not feeling all that sharp up here. And in the workplace, if you're running a business, if you're trying to maintain a family, it's not a great way to feel. So that is why I approach alcohol in the way that I do, and why I'm very, very selective about when I let my cognitive ability be compromised. Next up, we have the big old question, which is, how does alcohol affect sleep? And the answer, in simple terms, is quite a lot. And that is because whilst alcohol can make us feel like it's easier to get to sleep, the quality of sleep is massively affected. There's some information online here and available in the link down below that talks you through one of the studies that shows the link between not only the compromised quality of sleep, but the behavioral patterns that come with it, whereby athletes that are found to be drinking recreationally will often stay out later, which means not only are they going to bed later than they normally would, but their quality of sleep is reduced, which means the restorative element of sleep, which is essential as an athlete that's looking to get the best out of themselves, perform as well as they can, and most importantly, adapt to the training and the suffering that they've been through to get there. And you know who knows an awful lot about this subject? Our good friends at Whoop. And whilst I feel like that was more of an infinity gauntlet thing, I'm going to give some examples on the screen just here of how alcohol has affected my sleep when I have had one beer, when I have had 2 beers, and when I have sent it. As you can see, all compromised, and I can tell you for free just how much. I wasn't going to charge you for it anyway, so don't worry about that. But 1 beer does have an effect on me. 2 beers, I'll feel a bit rough. And when I do send it, I've already factored for how I'm going to feel, so I tend to actually ignore my Whoop data that day. But what Whoop serves to show here is not to scare you away from alcohol, but to show you that it will have an impact. And Whoop is a fantastic tool that I use to keep an eye on my overall recovery. And when I have had a beer with a networking event, or if I'm at the airport late at night or something like that, and just feel like I'm wanting the ceremony of a pint, being the very British bloke that I am, I can monitor my Whoop over the next couple of days to make sure that I'm making informed decisions around what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to get the best out of myself and to recover around the alcohol consumption. If you would like to give Whoop a go and you have not yet done so already, then please use the link in the description down below and you can get yourself your first month free. Try before you buy, if you will, and you can see just how damaging alcohol can be to your quality of sleep. A quick point I want to add in here is ultimately how long alcohol is in your bloodstream, and I'm going to hold my hands all the way up in the air and laugh at myself from 5 or 6 years ago, as I actually quite regularly used to have a couple of pints after work and then head to Genesis Gym in Alperton, northwest London, and do my powerlifting training. Here is a good example of me failing a 220 kilo 1-inch deficit deadlift after 2 pints. Did I fail because of the pints? We'll never know. To put this into broader context, the point I'm trying to make here is if you are consuming alcohol, be conscious of how long it stays in your bloodstream. Obviously, we can all laugh at the younger version of Fergus who actually just used to train having consumed some booze. But for example, if you're working in London, New York, in a corporate setting, wherever you are in the world, then having a big Thursday night and then going to the gym first thing on the Friday morning, there could still be alcohol in your bloodstream, which does have an enormous impact on physiological performance. So all I'm trying to do here is encourage you to be mindful of when you're consuming alcohol around your training so that you ultimately aren't executing any training sessions with booze in your bloodstream, as I think we can all agree that sounds like a bad idea. A final point to cover from the realm of science is recovery, as there are 3 key components to set the scene with, which are stimulating muscle protein synthesis, adequate hydration, and replenishing glycogen. Now, glycogen you can do through carbohydrate intake, but muscle protein synthesis and hydration are both compromised with alcohol consumption. So rugby players, I am talking to you, disband yourself from the myth that beer is in fact a fantastic recovery drink, as it is full of B vitamins, water and electrolytes, because they are not in high enough levels to actually justify being a recovery drink. Although we all wish that was the case, it is in fact not. So just be conscious that if you've got a big training week, then having a couple of beers, having a big weekend is going to impact your recovery. And I think the word recovery has spiraled a little bit out of control in the fitness industry, whereby once you are beyond the point of return, there aren't supplements you can take, cold plunges you can do, and books you can read that are going to bring you back from that point of being inadequately recovered. And for any team sports players, specifically rugby players feeling attacked at this point, then there is some science that we can refer to, linked in the description down below, assessing post-match ingestion of beers and the effect that it has on the athletes that consume them. So don't take it from me, take it from PubMed and the researchers that created the study, and check it out in the link in the description down below. So to finish things off, I'm going to give my recommendations, and they are fourfold. First and foremost, I would encourage you to plan in your alcohol consumption if it's going to be more than 1 or 2 beverages. This means looking at the totality of your training plan, the totality of your workload, and where does social situations allow for alcohol consumption. Don't be spontaneous, which I know is a very boring thing to say, but being spontaneous can allow to excessive consumption and all of the negative association that we've already covered today. So point number 1 is to plan in your consumption, and whilst your friends might think it's a bit weird to make a WhatsApp group 7 months in advance for a social event that you're going to drink at, I do it on the regular and they're used to it by now. Point number 2 is to find a replacement for that itch that occasionally comes when you're making a stir fry or when you're mowing the lawn on a sunny Sunday afternoon. And my recommendation is finding an alcohol-free beer that scratches the itch. For me, and potentially for you, if you're based in the UK, Days have provided me with that very solution. They are also a sponsor of the Modern Mind podcast, so they are very close to my heart, as they are also brewed 15 miles down the road and Scottish owned as a business. So they massively exceed the big brewers' 0.0% beers. So if you would like to save 20% off, please use the code Fergus20 at checkout to do so. And I believe as of right now, there is a Black Friday sale going on. So if you're watching this before the end of November, then you can save yourself 30% off. Link in the description down below. Point number 3 is around supplementation, and whether you're in a warm climate or not, if you are somebody that moderately drinks, I would encourage you to have electrolyte supplements on hand at all times. As we've already discussed, electrolytes are massively out of whack when you're consuming alcohol, and the best thing that we can do to try and get ourselves back to some sort of baseline is to really replenish our electrolytes. So make sure you've got electrolytes in the house, at your workplace, whatever it is, so that they're easily accessible, because those Thursday beers, that Saturday night beers, first thing you want to be focusing on is getting those electrolytes back on board. Number 4 is not to be dogmatic, rigid, strict if you don't feel that you need to be. There will be people online that will tell you that alcohol is the devil, that's going to ruin your life, and a lot of that is quite biased. I don't think life is as binary as that. I don't think individuals are as binary as that. I don't think that cultures are as binary as that. So what you need to do is experiment with what works for you, be sensible around your decision making, take on board some of the points that we presented today to make informed decisions around your alcohol consumption. And if you do decide to send it once a quarter for your birthday, for your friend's birthday, a wedding, don't beat yourself up about it. It's perfectly okay to be an athlete and to act like a normal person. We are all normal people at the end of the day. Whilst we might be working hard for big events, we might be making sacrifices in our social life, we don't need to be doing that all the time. There's a lot of living to be done in life, and I think occasionally social events where you drink some champagne and take some silly photos with your friends is a fantastic thing to do. On the flip side, if you have a negative relationship with alcohol, if there's a history of alcoholism in your family or anything like that, please ignore everything I've said today, because I can't tell you what to do. I don't want to tell you what to do, and it's up to you to make individual decisions on it. But all I'd encourage you to do is be open-minded to your approach. Being teetotal might be the best thing for you. Not being teetotal might be the best thing for you. We all fit somewhere on that spectrum, and it's up to you to determine what that is. It's taken me years of practice to find what works best for me, and I'm now in quite a comfortable position, but I must admit that whenever I am hungover, I am on the phone to Domino's, I am compromised with my training, I'm not feeling all that great cognitively, so I have had to become aware of that and work it into my schedule. You cannot beat human physiology, so stop trying to. If you're hungover, you're going to feel terrible. If you're drinking beers, your sleep's going to be compromised. You can't beat these things, so make sure that you factor them in and you make more informed decisions around what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and you'll be just fine. So hopefully that's covered things off as to how I manage alcohol as a hybrid athlete, and given you some things to consider how you can manage alcohol as an athlete, whether that is a hybrid or otherwise. Just a quick reminder to like the video if you haven't yet done so, comment down below with your thoughts, feelings or counter arguments, and make sure to have hit the subscribe button, as I would love to see more of your beautiful face around here. But with that in mind, I'm going to say cheers one and all, and see you next time.